This thing going? Family Shibboleths, a glossary of Albertisms. So the other week I hosted my mom, two brothers, assorted nieces, and a nephew for Thanksgiving. My niece Laura brought a custom-made bingo card called Calbert Thanksgiving Bingo. You'll have to go to my blog if you want to see the card. I guess I could hold it up. Well, anyway, so a little explanation on that. So a Calbert is a California Albert. A Walbert are the Washington State Alberts, and the Woolenhaups are other relatives from my mother's side that came for lunch the next day. So I dig this family bingo concept. It's a nice way to celebrate the little idiosyncrasies and oddities that make a family feel close. We didn't actually compete at family bingo. That would have been required 14 unique bingo cards, and people would have had to carry them around the whole time. But instead, we just had the one card, and we posted it to the fridge. And we achieved almost a complete blackout. We just had we had 3 boxes unfilled. So I think there's a little bit of room to refine this game and make it a tradition. So first we could have a card for each person up on the fridge, and anyone could mark things off. That's right, we'd help each other win. And second, we can improve what goes in the squares. So we had sexist joke. Actually, not quite sure why that was checked off. But anyway, Uncle Max brings the house down. Gravy is referred to as a lubricant. Cats are unusually mean. Politics are deflected. The landlord. Conversation about good beer. NPR plays in the background. Uncle Dana talks about the time there wasn't gravy on Thanksgiving. Someone complains about their Thanksgiving seating. A mention of Uncle Dana's blog. Someone spews their drink. Let's all go around and say what we're thankful for. A big sniff by Uncle Dana, a discussion about vaccination, and a joke about loosening one's pants at the dinner table. But those aren't perfect. Cats are unusually mean, for example, could never apply in this household because, for one thing, we have just the one cat. And also, what counts as unusually, given that all cats are asocial predatory beasts? Meanwhile, NPR plays in the background could apply to many a Bay Area home, but not mine. I dislike talk radio of any kind, and there'd be no way to hear it over the sound of all those Alberts anyway. As for the final missing square, someone spews their drink. Apparently, the only reason this didn't happen was that my nephew Peter couldn't come. I'm told he seems to make it his mission to make a sibling or relative laugh explosively while drinking, hoping that said drink will spew out of said relative's nose. Peter stayed home from Thanksgiving because he was required by his megalomaniac coach to I don't know how much we lost. I had an incoming call. Sorry about that. Anyway, Peter couldn't come to Thanksgiving because his megalomaniac coach demanded he attend basketball practice on Thanksgiving Day just to kiss the ring and demonstrate that sport comes before family. But I digress. So the family bingo game got me thinking about why family gatherings are so enjoyable. For one thing, we get that comforting sense of belonging, of being among our tribe. The quirky idiosyncratic lingo that we tend to throw around helps cement this. Of course, my family isn't alone in this. Roz Chast, the cartoonist, recounts in the New Yorker how she pulled her friends to learn what term their families used for picking through the fridge instead of cooking a meal. In her house, they called this fending. I think of such linguistic peculiarities as a family shibboleth. Now, in case you haven't heard this term, Wiki defines shibboleth as any custom or tradition, usually a choice of phrasing or even a single word, that distinguishes one group of people from another. Of course, I mean shibboleth in a good way. The origin of this word from the Old Testament is actually pretty dark. After a battle between the Gileadites and the Ephraimites, any Ephraimite refugees who were intercepted were challenged to pronounce shibboleth, because in their dialect it sounded like Sibboleth. And anyone who pronounced it Shibboleth was identified as the enemy and immediately killed. And clearly this isn't the point where family gatherings are involved. Naturally, we want everybody well versed in our lingo. Generally, our members pick it up easily enough. For example, early in the visit, when I asked my youngest niece, age 9, if she liked butter, she looked puzzled and said something like, sure. Instead of the right answer, which is, yeah, butter. But when I asked her again 3 days later, she responded correctly. Notwithstanding her swift adaptation, the family lingo can certainly be bewildering to a newcomer, and my niece Laura, recently engaged, asked me to create a family glossary for her fiance's benefit. Anytime somebody asks me to write something, especially on the subject of words and wordplay, I find the prospect irresistible. And I got a couple examples, links there in my blog. And so I've compiled a glossary of Albertisms, replete with etymologies. What does this have to do with you, the lay albertnet reader? Well, for one thing, if you're reading this, you're probably my mom, or perhaps one of my brothers. And even if you're not, you ought to find this amusing. Moreover, I've witnessed family gatherings where people were too quiet or seemed lacking in family shibboleths, so I hereby give you permission to totally steal these and introduce them into your own family dialogue. If any of my family members don't like this, they can complain in the comments area below or on their own social platforms. So I've grouped these into general categories, starting with food-related terms, since family gatherings tend to center around the kitchen. Next are the cinematic references my family is so fond of. The last section comprises the truly weirdest utterances, many of which celebrate important bits of family history dating back decades. All right, so let's start. Culinary Albertisms. Jukebox. This means microwave oven. Origin is Kitchen Confidential. Until my oldest daughter went off to college, she had no idea that this term and the next three weren't ubiquitous. So next we have microbe. Same thing as a microwave oven. Nuke is to heat in the microwave oven, i.e. or e.g. I don't feel like cooking. Let's just nuke some leftovers. Radar love. That's the process of heating via the microwave oven. For example, this isn't hot enough. Give it a little more radar love. Again, that's from Kitchen Confidential. Bell's seasoning is the key to Thanksgiving, and thus the subject of much discussion. There's a whole AlbertNet blog post on that. Tranya is any tasty beverage, including energy drink. It's often used in the statement, "Drink, it's Tranya. I hope you relish it as much as I." The origin is a Star Trek episode. Pretty yum means delicious. The origin is a 5-star Yelp review of a dim sum restaurant in San Francisco around 2015 that my Dutch niece and nephew joined my family at. Do you like butter? Yeah, butter. This is a standard verbal exchange whenever butter is present. The origin is my friend Pete's home ec teacher back in 1983, responding spontaneously when randomly asked if she liked butter. Lekker, same thing as pretty yum. This is from the Dutch Alberts. And splaula, it's another word for spatula, especially a rubber spatula. The origin is what my daughters and I thought my wife had written on her shopping list years ago due to her encryption-like handwriting. This leads us to the cinematic Albertisms. You're not the quarterback here, Mike. Say this whenever somebody is overstepping or attempting to have too much influence. Do not substitute your interlocutor's name for Mike. Always say Mike. This is from Breaking Away. Cutter started it. Trot this out whenever you're chastised for pointlessly bickering. It's not important who actually started the argument, of course. That's also from Breaking Away. It's a crazy world. Someone ought to sell tickets. Sure, I'd buy one. Whenever you encounter an instance of the world being, in fact, crazy, you should always say so, and then wait for the correct response, which is the bit about selling tickets. If this response is not received, pause a few beats, and then say, sure, I'd buy one anyway, to inspire your interlocutor to try harder next time. This is also from Raising Arizona. Say, that reminds me. Use this whenever changing the subject, or even when continuing on the same subject, or whenever harmless verbal garnish is desired. That's also from Raising Arizona. I'm defecating you negative. This is a more family-friendly way of saying I shit you not. It avoids both the profane word and its common synonym, poop, which is, of course, far worse. The origin, this is from Raising Arizona, although my family substitutes defecating for crappin', which is still too risque for the youngest Alberts. I guess that's why they call it a way homer. Say this whenever one of your jokes bombs. If your interlocutor replies, why is that? Then you say with much hilarity, 'cause you'll get it on the way home. Ideally, the next response will be, I'm already home, Glenn. Even if your interlocutor is not at home. This will have been a perfect volley. This is right out of Raising Arizona, once again. Does Pope wear a funny hat in the woods? This simply means yes or perhaps hell yeah. This is a combination of the quote from Raising Arizona and the expression, does a bear shit in the woods? Not quite sure how those got combined, but $2! $2! While walking like a zombie. This one's a bit tricky. You have to walk slowly with your spine totally erect and your head back and your eyes fixed on a distant point in the ceiling, saying, $2! $2! Over and over again. You do this when you don't know what else to do. For example, if somebody's explaining why he or she went gluten-free. The origin is the movie Better Off Dead, combined with some random zombie walking, which my young Dutch nephew Max first encountered around the same time. He somehow conflated the two, having probably never even seen Better Off Dead. And his father later complained that Max was staggering around like a zombie, chanting $2 pretty much nonstop. So this one is a tribute to youthful enthusiasm and joie de vivre. Good luck. We're all counting on you. Say this whenever anyone is embarking on anything. This is one of those lines that somehow improves with age and repeated usage. That's from the movie Airplane. Vol is pleased. This is shorthand for I am the eyes and ears of Vol, and Vol is pleased. There's no perfectly prescribed situation for using this. Just exercise your best judgment. And that one's from Star Trek. All right, that brings us to the particularly idiosyncratic Albertisms. Or maybe it's This means just kidding. So the origin on this one is when I first moved to California, I lived and worked with my brother Jeff, and we biked to work and back together, and we socialized together and went for, training rides together. In short, we were practically inseparable. Sometimes got a little tired of one another, which could result in witty verbal exchanges that sometimes became caustic or acerbic. So to soften this, we took to formally indicating the jocular nature of a comment by attaching which Jeff reckons is spelled at the end. For example, we'd say something like, wait, you traveled 3 hours for this bike race and you didn't bring your USCF license? Why would you think they'd let you register? Your good looks? Astonishingly, almost everyone we knew adopted this usage, including this one kid, Dave E., who couldn't even say it right, so he came out, So more than 30 years later, this is still standard usage across among Alberts, across generations. Meow. This is how to answer the phone. The origin is our friend Davey's mom back in like 1980. Meow. This means I don't know. The origin is a contraction over time of I don't know. So I guess it went like, I don't know. Meow. Nope. This is basically either just kidding or scratch that. The origin is this was uttered by my friend Chris as we were looking at VHS cassettes at the video store. And he suggested, let's Blame It on Rio. And then realizing that his young lust was obviously the only possible motivation for wanting to see such a drippy movie, he got embarrassed and uttered the now immortal phrase, nope, or try to retract it. I need to drop some friends off in the toilet. You use this when you're excusing yourself to go do a download. The origin is a euphemism, drop some friends off at the pool, but it was warped unintentionally by a very young Albert and spoken with a redneck accent for no clear reason. Micturate. This just means urinate, and it's certainly not an Albert coinage. It's unclear how this became our family's preferred term, given how seldom other families typically use it, as far as I know. Okay, Christmas is canceled. This is trotted out annually as a so far empty threat. The origin of this one is our mom said this repeatedly during our childhood out of sheer exasperation at either our awful behavior or her contempt for the rampant commercialism of the holiday, or maybe both. Motherfrockle. This basically means motherfucker. The origin is my niece Rachel, when very young, was verbally abused by another kid and told her father, but didn't want to use the actual word. So he asked her to whisper it in his ear, and she put her mouth to his ear and whispered, he called me a frockle. I don't wear contacts because I care about my eyes. Say this whenever somebody mentions contact lenses or puts them in or takes them out, as a way to pass judgment. The origin is our dad pompously declared this when he first learned that I wear contacts. He followed this up with some long diatribe about how some lady friend of his who had like the first generation hard contact lenses slept with them and then they were stuck to her eyes. Never mind that this was over 40 years before and she was an idiot. Brings us to EU X. So EUD, EUM, EUG. This stands for Evil Uncle Dana, Evil Uncle Max, and Evil Uncle Jeff. All three uncles get the evil moniker, and the standard abbreviation, EUD, EUM. The origin is my brother Brian was the first to have kids and the last to become an uncle. So the rest of us got this label mainly due to our actually being pretty much evil or at least a bad influence. What we need here is a physics major. Say this to insult a sibling. You can substitute whatever college major you need. For example, during an argument about grammar, you could say to me, what we need here is an English major. Origin of this one is during a long, complicated scientific discussion, which included possibly all of his sons and definitely Brian. Our dad said this as if to deny the very fact of Brian's major, which was indeed physics. What we need here is a physics major. You are real lucky. So you say this to any family member who seems even remotely lucky or successful, or who has avoided failure or cataclysm, as a way to deny that his or her good fortune has anything to do with character, pluck, or effort. You can also tell yourself this several times a day as a way of feeling gratitude. It's especially useful if, like me, you actually are real lucky. The origin is our dad said to me, you are real lucky you didn't do more damage, an angry response to what he evidently perceived as my utter incompetence when I did some very minor damage to my car. You can find the details on my blog. You're not very bright, are you? Say this to any family member who says or does anything even slightly incorrect or questionable. Origin, our dad famously, though perhaps apocryphally, said this to me after I rode 130 miles over the highest pass in North America without proper food or even a jacket and got caught in a thunderstorm. The details are on my blog. I'm going out there. Don't try to stop me. You fool, you'll be killed. I must do this alone. Whenever you leave the house, utter the first statement. Your interlocutor should utter the second, and then you close out the dialogue with the third utterance. If your interlocutor neglects or refuses to provide the second statement, pause for a few beats and deliver the closing line anyway to inspire your interlocutor to try harder next time. All over the place, spaced out, blah! This is a nice way to point out that a family member, particularly a teenager, has totally dropped the ball. Origin of this one is back in the 80s, our mom once completely lost her shit and delivered a powerful, thundering harangue, including several instances of this very useful expression. The bleh part should be delivered with extreme gusto and high volume, ideally with your eyes practically bugging out. Note, do not deliver this diatribe in a library or a museum. Bundle up, Billy! Say this to any family member heading out into the cold, especially if you wish to advise and also demean the person. For example, if you're talking to a teenager who finds the idea of a jacket, not to mention protective parenting, highly offensive. Do not substitute any other name for Billy. Always use Billy. Origin is an actual quote concerning our friend Bill, whose loving mother said this to him, and which we all took to saying to him constantly all winter long, ad infinitum. Interesting aside, Bill now lives in Perm, Russia, which isn't technically Siberia, but is halfway there. And the average high temperature there in winter is just 18 degrees Fahrenheit. Bundle up indeed. Come and get it or I'll throw it out. This is what you say when the family meal is on the table. The Origin is one of those Time Life Old West books, probably The Cowboys. I read this sentence aloud to my mom and brothers back in 1975, and it just stuck. Landlow. This is our mom's second husband. His name comes up around Thanksgiving based on certain hijinks. He actually was her landlord, and when he got greedy and said she either needed to buy the apartment or move out, she slipped between the horns of the dilemma by marrying him and thus moving in with him, which was a huge mistake, as you can see through my Thanksgiving tales linked there on my blog. Bye. Obviously, this word itself isn't a family shibboleth, but we say it in a very specific way, waving annoyingly by opening and closing a hand, which is held up right up next to our face, which shows an expression of utter disgust and dismissal. Bye. This is useful for whenever a family member departs, but particularly through a car window as the family member drives away. The Origin, this is how one of us, or perhaps all of us at one time or another, were kicked out of the green scene, a go-kart track for reckless driving in the mid-'80s. Slop lecker. This means sleep well. Originally, sleep tasty. This is a standard Dutch expression brought to us by the Netherlands branch of the family. Don't let the hum-hums bite. This means don't let the bedbugs bite. Now, this is what our brother Jeff used to say to his son Max because he was very young and the idea of bedbugs terrified him. You know, I really like X. I mean, I know that's not profound or nothing. Heck, we all do. But for me, I think it goes far beyond that. This is really useful every time you encounter something you like. It's a way of expressing gratitude very formally and passionately. This is from a Far Side cartoon. Out of my way, mother-daughter. This expression gets nearly constant use, pretty much whenever a wife, mother, or daughter is in your way. I have 2 daughters, a mom, a wife, and at least 8 nieces. Thus, I say this probably 700 times a year. The origin is during a violent dispute with my brother Max, then a teenager. Our dad fled down the hall with Max in hot pursuit, ready to beat his ass. And our brother Brian was squarely in the way, either to intervene or as a pawn caught in a deadly game. And Max yelled something similar to this, except that what he said was decidedly more profane, along the lines of, "Out of my way, mother frockle." Granted, this is a pretty dark memory to be dredging up all the time, but perhaps by saying this jovially, we're neutralizing that old trauma, or at least owning it.